Okay, you're ready to go.
Good morning, all. This is a meeting of the Capital Committee. Today is Tuesday, October 12, 2021. Welcome. On the agenda today, it's a continuation of our discussions from last week. A couple of items, one being a little bit further discussion in the project related to telecom replacement for the city hall and other municipal buildings. And then we want to get into a discussion about potential funding of projects and looking at the list of what we can accommodate and all. Prior to this meeting, I've circulated a potential list of items, and then but nothing is etched in stone, and then it's just sort of open up a discussion about what it is that we would like to see we can get together on a package capital recommendation. I should mention that Alderwoman Davis isn't going to be joining us this morning. She had a conflict over the HUD's committee. So I told her that we'd keep her abreast of any discussions for today, and then hopefully just move forward with over the next couple of meetings, at least with recommendations. So without delaying the agenda any further, Judy, are you with us?
I'm here.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the last week you talked about a need to replace phone systems throughout the city government. I know we talked about having AT&T. There was a concern about them being a potential vendor of any such, so we didn't want to. So I understand you're not going there today, but you do have some people who can discuss a little bit more in detail some of the requests, why we're requesting it, what the estimated costs are, and things like that. So I'll give the floor to you if you want to go ahead and start.
Okay, yeah, we'll go ahead and get started on that. I do want to say, when you talked about the monthly cost and stuff, I am working to get that. I'm not going to know everything just simply because all the departments get their own invoices and stuff. But I am going to work with Bev to see what we're paying AT&T on a monthly basis right now. So that's about the only way we're going to be able to get that, because I won't know what all the different departments are paying. It doesn't come through us.
Okay.
Okay, but we're going to talk about the equipment and why we need to upgrade this, and Sherry's going to do that.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
You might want to come a little closer, but that's all right.
Okay, hold on here. Sorry. My name is Sherry.
Do you need to share a screen of any?
No.
No. We're just here to talk about the reason that we are in dire need of replacing our infrastructure first. The current system that we're on is a Plexar system. It's been in place for over 25 years with the city of St. Louis. My other person, my colleague here, Ray Gant, is over our technical and maintenance side of the house. And 25 years ago, when we put in the Plexar system, we used a lot of the existing infrastructure. Fortunately, technology has changed over the years. We cannot use the same infrastructure that we currently use to implement any phone system. Our phone system wiring in the city of St. Louis has been, like any other infrastructure around the nation, has been crumbling. And it is at a point that because we do need to go to our new platform, we have to have the backbone structure in place in order for our phone system to ride over that. Of course, technology has changed, and so has the way that our departments do business. COVID has been one of the entities that have actually changed the way some of the city departments do business, but phone systems are designed to support the function of each department. So when we choose a phone system, we make sure that it's extremely robust, that it's going to take us far into the future, and it's going to give the different departments what they're looking for to do their business. Every department is different. Some departments require very little, just a phone service and to be able to work with their residential customers and their business customers. Some departments need call centers though, where they're routing calls and they have to have reporting on calls coming in per hour. So we're already using those technologies all over the city. The Plexar system that we're on, we've been on for 25 years, but other satellite offices within the city of St. Louis are using very up-to-date technology. And that's what we'd like to do, is move the downtown campus to the new technology. When we decide to implement a service, we look at other municipalities as well. And we always use a two-model approach. We use the top 2 performers in the telecommunication industry when we do make our selection. And so we learn through experience that it's not best to implement a lot of different phone systems in our campus. It's best to have 1 or 2 systems, but we don't put all of our eggs in one basket. So we do use 2. We use 1 in the downtown area, and we also use in our satellite offices like parks, recreation, streets. We use another system. So we do have 2 ongoing systems at the same time. When we sit down with a department, we design the system to work according to the way that their departments function. So they tell us what they would like to see, what they've seen out there, how they'd like to change or grow their business. And then we design that phone system according to the way that they use their phone system. It is a very tailored and detailed approach. It's a huge project, and it's broken down into a lot of small components. We didn't want you all, I think some of the comments that were made last week were that we would not put in a very robust system. And that's just not the way that we do business. We make sure that we put in solutions that are higher than industry standards. And we make sure that we do the training that's necessary on our side to maintain it. And then also the users who are going to use those phone systems, we train them as well. Do you have any questions?
One of the ones that jumps out at me, there was a question about landline technology. You mentioned Plexar, which I assume is a hardwire system.
The city of St. Louis does not use landlines. We use business application systems.
So what is that?
Landlines are for homes.
Okay, so explain that. Explain that if you could.
I did. Landlines are something that home phones use. Telephone systems are a whole network of applications moving different components and functionality to the phone system so that each department is able to service their customer in the way that they need to service the customer. So we use trunks, and we use a lot of different technologies to deliver the product to the client. I'm not really sure what else.
And yeah, landlines is old technology.
Okay.
That really, I don't want to say doesn't exist, but just about is going away. So the service that you have in the downtown campus right now is what we call digital service. And that's the Plexar system that you're on today. That system has reached its end of life, is what we call it, in 2023. So the need for us to get off of this system as soon as we can it's real important right now. The infrastructure in the downtown campus, especially City Hall, there's a lot of the wiring infrastructure is very old. It actually came with the building. It needs to be replaced. We need fiber infrastructure and cabling infrastructure. And that seems to be the bulk of the price of what you guys are seeing. The new system is what you guys would see as maybe a voice over IP system. And it will be robust and features that you're looking for. We have call centers around the city of St. Louis that we use. We have ACD systems that will be going away because the call centers will be taken over. This system will do everything you guys need. If you don't like voicemail, you can have your voicemail go straight to email. So the system is robust, but whichever system we decide to get. We hadn't committed and with any vendor just yet. But once we get the infrastructure in, of the wiring and the cabling and the fiber, any system we choose will work with that wiring infrastructure.
Is that infrastructure also similar to what's providing us on our internet service, or is that something separate?
No, that's something separate. That's separate. Our infrastructure would be completely separate.
Is there a system that could also be provided through the internet, or is that not something that is recommended?
It can, but what we, we like to keep everything separate for quality of service. You don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. If we put everything on one internet structure, if that internet service decides to go down, then everything is down. Your voice and your computers are down. See, if we try to keep it separate, we always have. That way, if at least if you got some type of communication, if we have trouble with one.
Okay, I'll open it up to the committee if they have questions. Go ahead, Nancy. Yeah,
I have a concern that that I understand your concern about everyone being on the same system, but that is the wave of moving into the 21st century, is doing more through the computer and the internet with the phone service and the computer service, rather than having a system that is dependent on, you said business application systems. And I, from what I've seen, I've only been here a few months, but most people are not using the landlines. I'm sorry, the hard phone that's wired into the office as much as they are using their computer or their cell phones to communicate. And I'm just wondering if we're buying something that mostly people are no longer using, if we're making the right decision. And maybe we should look at how other departments have moved. The treasurer's office did this with similar to what Paul's talking about, is moving to a system that is reliable on the internet and can move us further along into the 21st century and not have us held to a lot of wires and a lot of landlines. I'm sorry, the business application system lines that you're talking about as we move forward. Like, how did you reach the decision to go this route?
We've always been separate from the IT department. We have separate functions. We serve separate needs. Their needs are not our needs, and our needs are not their needs. They are specialized in one area and we're specialized in another area. We do use our systems that we currently use, like the one we have in 1520 Market. We do use our system. We administer our system over the internet. I don't want you to think that it's one versus the other. It's an integrated approach. It's just that the two departments don't serve the same function. So we service the voice function for telephone services throughout the city of St. Louis. They service computers. They're two different functions. And so we're specialized and trained, and our professionalism is in those two different areas. So our area has always been the phone system. We're not the computer system, and vice versa. So even though they may share in terms of wiring, their computer system runs off of wiring and our phone system runs off of wiring, it's not the same wiring. And it never has been, because we're two separate entities. It is a lot of companies in the past have decided to combine the two services only to have to re-spend money to separate them out again. We learn from other companies, we learn from state facilities, and it's important that we stay abreast of those changes that come down. And what we have learned is that it sounds great to combine the services. But when it comes down, you have unsatisfied customers, and it's always split out again. And so that is the way that it is. That is, we are two different professions.
I'm not saying that you want two different professions. I'm saying that although that's true, is that the best way to do the work going forward? Is that the best way? And have you had companies or anybody that you interviewed about how to do the upgrades that you need? Did you talk to others to see what their ideas were or what we could be doing differently?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, we just got off of a call. Our department constantly looks at technologies to move the city of St. Louis forward. A lot of our drivers are city departments themselves, though. City departments want phones on their desk. They don't want to use headsets and talk through computer screens. They want to interact. A lot of their customers come in and work directly with them also on counter situations. So it's a little bit different than an office environment because we do service the public. So we actually talk to department heads and find out what it is that they see coming down the pipe, how they would like to move forward, and how they would like their phone systems to support them with call routing, with reporting. These are the things that are done all over the nation with phone systems. And that's what we do.
Is everyone, are all departments going to be in the same capabilities, or do you structure those needs based on, or structure the setup based on the needs of the individual departments? And
we have
some of them are more sophisticated than others in terms of what kind of communications they need to make.
Oh, sure. I mean, what we do, just to give you a brief overview of how we handle it, it's before we even get to the customer, we have identified all the lines that need to be changed over into the new system. We use blueprints. We walk around, we speak with our customers, our constituents, and we make sure that whatever it is that they need, their phone system support, their job function is handled. And whether it be with a call center application, whether it be over the internet with, like, our Citizen Service Bureau uses a call center, they use texting, they use Facebook and all those things are integrated into their phone system. And so that, different departments have different needs. So we actually meet with each department head and even beyond the department heads, because department heads run facilities and organizations. People that report to them do their jobs differently. So we have to hear how people do their jobs on an everyday basis and how the phone system in the past has supported them and what they're looking for from us in the future. And that's how we've always done it. And, that's the way that we'll continue to do it. It is a very, it's a big project, and there are a lot of moving parts and pieces that in order for us to deliver what each department wants, it's not just departments, it's sections within the departments, because your a department, say it's Slate, it has several different sections and they move differently. So we have to design the phone system to move according to the function of the department. So it's not just an out of a box phone system. We have to actually design it and tailor it to meet the needs of our constituents, and our constituents just happen to be city employees.
And your estimate today, at least from a upfront costs or capital costs, are a little over $4.9 million. And I am assuming, given that you presented, this would be over phases, so that would be $4.9 million over the next 2 years. Is that?
Yes, we need to start immediately. I don't know how soon these funds can be available because as we said, we are coming off of the Plexar platform in September of 2023. So we have to start moving now with our wiring contractor. And we've already identified the phases that need to take place. So phase 1 will begin, and we just want to make sure that funding is available so that we can move forward and have our city business systems off by September of 23.
So I'd like to ask a question, Paul, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Okay, so I'm just curious to know, we're on this AT&T Plexar system, two systems as you described it, and I understand that. My question, I guess, would be is, this is something that you described that we've had for 25 or so years and something we've been, working with. What other innovative type systems, can you give us a feel for what other options or innovative systems you guys have looked at in place of this, and brought you around to determine that this is still the right system?
Well, we look at we always have two standards in the city of St. Louis. We usually, this time we have a standard, one comes from AT&T and one comes from ShoreTel. And both of those are very robust systems. They can provide artificial intelligence, which is something that is used now in phone systems to make sure that when a client calls in and they have questions, a lot of times those questions can be answered without speaking with the city employee. And so artificial intelligence is a interface that allows the caller that's calling in to say a few words and then be able, and that artificial intelligence allows the phone system to grow according to the needs of each department. So that's one of the things that we are looking at. And then with the ShoreTel system, a lot of the systems, what you'll find is a lot of the top systems do pretty much the same things. And so what you want to do though is make sure that your constituents' needs are being met. So the city workers are really the drivers, and the drivers tell us over the years, they have told us what they would like to see. And it has been our job and our responsibility and pleasure to make sure that they get what they need. The only thing that is different right now is that our infrastructure has been in place for since probably the 40s and 50s. And we have to get a new infrastructure in order to move the city forward. So we're looking at making sure that we accommodate the city for the next 30 years. And we do choose systems that last that long. And we have had that expertise and that ability to choose systems that last a long time. And, we're proud of that. Unfortunately, technology is moving faster today than the way that we did business years ago. So we just want to make sure that we have a good infrastructure in place so that whatever phone system we choose is riding over something that makes it work and make it robust. We don't want it bogged down. We don't want it tied down. So it's important that we move forward. And that's all we're really doing, is making sure that the Capital Committee understands that we have a crumbling infrastructure in our downtown campus. And it's not just City Hall. When we do this, we are talking about City Hall. As you have the list of all the buildings that we have to take into account. And that tells you also all the department heads and all of the supervisors that we meet with to design the phone system according to their needs. So we are not, because we've been doing this for over 25 years and we have our fingers on the pulse, we're not going to bring in something that is not going to work for the city. We're going to make sure that city needs are met. And so we use AT&T systems and we use Mitel ShoreTel systems because they're top of the line. And it means that we don't have to come back in 2 years and replace a phone system. We want the best bang for our buck. And so that's what we do.
So I hear all that, and I appreciate all your efforts there. Let me just ask this follow-up question. I heard Nancy refer to an upgraded phone system that I believe the treasurer's office is using. Have you guys taken a look at that? Is that something we could utilize in our system or no?
No, we really can't speak to it because they have gone outside. But what we do know, that's the department with 2 phones on their desk, right? Those people have decided to have 2 phones on their desk instead of 1. So that's not anything that we would model ourselves behind. We're not going to have 2 phone systems sitting on the desk. We actually design the phone systems according to how the departments need to move. And so we do not use them as an example.
Okay, thank you.
Any other follow-up questions?
Yes,
Committee?
I do. So what, Sharon, can you give us a couple of examples of who you look to as good examples of what you're trying to do with the upgrades you're looking to move?
The two that I just mentioned to you, we have a HVS system and we have a ShoreTel system. Those are two different systems that we use throughout the city of St. Louis and that are our voice over IP currently.
That's not my question. My question isn't who the provider is. My question is what company or cities did you look at that are using similar systems to that to make a decision that this was the way for us to go?
This morning, we had a presentation given to us by the state of Missouri's phone system. So we use the state of Missouri. We look at Baltimore as another city that we look at. We don't just look at, we look at volumes of phones because a small city could have 12 phones. We look at them, we try to match according to the amount of phones we have in the city of St. Louis. And Warshu is another example. So we use different.
Jacksonville, Florida.
Jacksonville,
That's where
Florida.
the HVS system came from.
So we use other municipalities. We look at other companies that are sized the way that we're sized. And we go out and we meet them and we talk to them. We've gone to the United Way when we decided to implement a call center with the city of St. Louis. We did our own research and then we found actual customers within that were using that system. And then we go out and talk to them to see what are some of the pros and cons of the applications that they're using. This is the way that we've always done business with the city of St. Louis. It's nothing new. What we're asking you all to do to fund this is we're just saying that our infrastructure, just like all the infrastructures across the United States, are crumbling. Phone systems, this is a standard operation that we do regarding phone systems. It's really the infrastructure that is the issue here.
Paul, I have no other questions at this time.
Okay, anyone else?
If you have any questions, please feel free to call me. My number is 657-3430.
Okay, well, thank you, guys. We'll be discussing this along as well as other projects that we got on the agenda to go over, but thank you for the presentation.
Thank you so much for your time.
Glad to be of service.
All right, thank you. 1 o'clock.
Okay. Next on our agenda is a discussion of both the recommended funding levels and some of the projects, potential projects for those to recommend. And you should have before you a sort of a draft scenario, potential projects. I'll post this for those watching. I'll post this online after the meeting, just to get the discussion started. But I'm going to pull this up so that we can get into it, and I'll just show you what we've done here. Oh, by the way, I did circulate also. I think Alderman Oldenburg, you had asked about before I even get into this. You had asked about the raw scores from the Citizens Advisory Committee survey, and I did send those out as well. This material will also be posted, but you can see where, again, following up on our discussion last week about the Citizens Advisory Committee survey, it was on a 10-point scale. Each project was ranked and or given a rating or grading on a 1 to 10 scale. And so these are just the summary of those results, so just give you an idea. But it was informative in that it gives us an idea about obviously what the highest ranked ones were, what were their concerns, obviously the things like the fire department replacement items for equipment and rec center roofs, all kind of things were up at the top of the list there. And and bridges also were too. So that gives us an idea about what their thinking was in terms of the highest priorities. And so just keep that in mind as we go to discuss what type of things that we would like to focus on. Now, let me pull up the other exhibit that I had. And start going here. Can you all see the exhibit? Is it on screen? Yes? Good.
No, just your screen.
Oh, it's just, is the exhibit or is it just? Let me see.
Your desktop.
On my desktop. Okay, let me go back here. Stop share. Pick up. Share. Just share the right screen. Now it should be there, right?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Okay. Given our discussion last week about how much we talked about different sources that would be available. We have AARP funds. We have the prior year surplus, half of the prior year surplus from fiscal 21. We had about $1 million in Devo funds that hadn't been appropriated in the budget. And then we have about $1.3 million in interest earnings from the 2018 GOB bonds. So in looking at that, and then and Nancy, this goes back to our discussion last week as well, as we said, hey, what kind of parameters should we look at? And we stopped, and you'd mentioned the $50 million limit on ARPA. So taking that into account, and I sort of consulted with Rich on this back and forth in terms of what priorities would have and what we could fit in. Obviously, it gets tough when you got a list that's much longer than the monies you're talking about. But I'm just going to go through this and see where we are. On the streets sections, obviously those things which are either have a grant funds available or which save us money was the top of my mind here. And these also happen to be things that were at the top of the CEC's list, as you'll note. The Tucker cycle track was $300,000. That's because there's a grant that's already there that's been awarded for that, and we just need the funds to match it to finish it. That would be there. LED streetlight conversions. I know, Rich, you're looking at some numbers, that updated numbers from streets, just to see if that number has changed. That was been at $4.2 million. And the reason why that's such a higher on the list there would be that this is one of the things that I know we can point to and say, hey, this not only is it good from an energy efficiency standpoint, but it also reduces costs. So that, which is a consideration when we look at these things.
Paul, yesterday I did confirm with Jamie Wilson. Light My St. Louis has fully funded 1,000 of the streetlights at $250 a piece, so we can remove 250,000 from the 4 million.
250, you said?
Yes, sir. So 3950.
3950. Okay, well, that gives us something. All right, so those were the two that we had. I was thinking those are the two from the street category. Bridges category. These were items that Rich had presented as these are structurally deficient bridges that need repair. Obviously, two things. One, from a public safety standpoint, you want to make sure your bridges are safe and well maintained, but also that you've got that 4-to-1 match that's available. So you're getting a bigger bang for the buck on those. Now, the only caveat to that is those aren't the match. You can't pay match from ARPA. So that would necessarily have to be from the from another source, which in this case would be the half surplus from the prior year from our capital fund monies. So acknowledging the importance of the bridge repairs, this is the 10-4. This would fund those bridge repairs as outlined by Rich as the critical needs on bridges, but this would attain that. Parks, Recreation, and Forestry, number one on the CAC's list, which went to the top, was this rec center roof replaces at $2.5 million. That would replace all the rec center roofs. And then there was other items ranked high on the list were the pool renovations, the rec center boiler replacements. The pool renovations would be a $7 million item. That's a big dollar amount there in terms of the scheme of things where we've only got a certain amount of available. So I did want to put something on there, and we can discuss this. And this would be $1 million, enough for at least one And then we also had some boiler replacements. That was also another $5 million item, which we've got some portion of that, basically 6 out of 30. So that's about a $1.9 million item. I did, when I was playing with these numbers, was interested in, Rich, I don't know your thoughts on this in terms of the cost estimates. I know that the pool renovations at $1 million, my recollection is that, and correct me if I'm misrecollecting, I remember when Marquette came up a few years ago, there was some discussion about how we can get it done, but it was such a big ticket item. And then someone came up with a sort of a bright idea, which was, hey, this was built with a diving pool at the end, and you really don't need that much depth. And so they raised the bottom, and actually it fixed the pool, but it was at a much lesser cost. And so I'm just curious about what your thinking is in terms of cost estimates, because all these estimates, all these numbers are estimates, and I was wondering whether or not we can get more out of what we think, or is this something where we can find out more as we proceed with certain projects that we might not have to spend as much as we think we do?
Yes, I would like to just take a minute and highlight some thoughts. I spent substantial amount of time with Director Greg Hayes, Parks Commissioner Kim Hagley over the last couple of days, slicing this up a little bit, just to try to get some ideas of, where we're looking at these three categories. So first of all, the rec center boiler replacements. The city rec centers, there are 9 of them. And so for the sake of discussion purposes, for the boilers, let's take out O'Fallon Park and Cronolette because they are newer. And so really what you have for boilers are Booter, Tandy, Marquette, Cherokee, Wool, 12th and Park, and Gamble. And so what we could do is we could take, whatever allotment we can squeeze into the funds, and we, the committee, can determine, say what the top 2 or 3 places of the rec centers are to do this. And we can allocate funding for it. Now, I also want to mention that although West End Rec Center is not technically a city rec center, it is a city rec center owned by the city and leased out to someone else, and that has needs as well. The same thing goes with the roof project. The order of the roofs are Booter, Marquette, 12th and Park, Wool, Cherokee, Tandy, and Gamble. But again, we could come back and say, however much money we can put into this, we can pick the top 2 or 3, whatever we can fund for it, and we can do those in pieces. Those are full roof replacements. Now, the one caveat to that is that the O'Fallon Park Rec Center is the newest of all the rec centers and has a roof that is probably in the worst shape because of all the bullet holes that are in it. So that is just food for thought on the roofs. And then certainly the pools, which you just talked about, there are 7 pools, 3 outdoor and 4 indoor pools. And the pools that the Parks Department would like to work on a little more than the pool you mentioned at Marquette Park are the 4 indoor pools. And those are Tandy, 12th and Park, Cherokee, and Wool. And I believe most of the issues with those pools are issues with, the pumps, the heaters, the circulation systems, the pool lighting systems, things like that, as opposed to Marquette where we had a main drain failure and we would have literally had to rip the whole bottom of the pool out. And what we did was we simply just raised the floor up to make it an even depth pool from one end to the other, because today, most people don't use the depth in the pools anyway. I don't think there are too many more situations like that. In this case, this is more mechanical type items for filtration and operation of the pool. So, what the Parks Department stressed to me is this is the needs list in order. When we really want to talk about how much we can put towards this, you see what the total is. I can tell you how many really need. So out of all the pools, 7, we really need 4. So, you can do the math and figure out what will be there and then divide it up by pool or roof or boiler. And well, of course, whatever money we come up with, that's what we'll program.
So you think you have some revisions that you could for some of these, which could fit, it might not be by each lineup, but it would say, hey, because this one might be in a little better shape than the others, we could focus on these 3 or 4 and do it that way, as opposed to just, and to be more specific about it on this list.
I can send you the list and needs. They went out over the last couple of days again and rated all these. I told them I want them on a scale of the highest priority to the least. I can give that to you in pools, boilers, and roof replacements very quickly.
Oh, that'd be great.
So Rich, can I just ask, if Booter had all that work done on it about a year and a half ago, they need a new boiler system?
That is a great point. They do, because what we put in there was AC, but the point, and I'm really glad you brought that up, Nancy, because Booter is, even though it's the most critical needed one to be replaced, it is the least used recreation center of all of them. So what Greg said is, yes, if you have funding to do that, it is the most critical, but you would probably get much more bang for your buck touching the people that use the rec centers if you skip down to the next one. So for example, on roofs, Marquette, or on boilers, Tandy. Okay. So yes, that's a great point. Thank you for reminding me of that.
And
Yeah.
Marquette is outside, so it wouldn't need a boiler.
Well,
What does
Marquette is a rec center.
Oh, the rec
So
center piece.
It
Okay.
has a roof and a boiler and a pool that is outside. So
Right.
there's some combinations. I can show them to you guys. I'll put a list together and send them out to you, Paul.
Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be great. Okay, and in the next category, fire department, that rated pretty highly, as it typically does, on both the building repairs, the firehouse roof replacements, and particularly the exhaust system repair, and then the vehicle replacements, the ones that are due to be replaced. Now, this doesn't have, in this scenario, it wouldn't have everything. There's a storage garage roof replacement that you'd have to defer, as well as the engine house floors on some of those engine houses. But everything else, this is pretty much everything else. And I don't know, Rich, whether you had any thoughts on that, but that's where we'd be with fire in this particular scenario.
So I would say that the roofs projects finish up the 30 fire stations. It's the last remaining 9 we have to do. The Magna Grip system, I think that is a no-brainer. That takes the carcinogens from the exhaust outside the building for health and safety of our firefighters. Then I would go down to the equipment and simply say, this is what we need in order to keep what we have most recently bought under the 18 bond in its rotation cycle, so it doesn't fall into disrepair. If you have any specific questions about the equipment purchases, Chris is on the call, and I'm sure he'd be glad to field those for you.
Okay, thank you, Rich. And then move into the police department. The 2 biggest items from a structural question or facility question were the elevator replacements and then the that stone facade, which risks falling off on the street there that they had talked about in their presentation. So that's 2.2 million. The rest of that request had to do with vehicles, and I know, having talked with Chris Amos, that there's a need for, we're falling behind each year in terms of the replacement. I know from the Citizens Advisory Committee, there was some hesitation about some of those replacements as well. It didn't rate high, but of course we've got particular operations that we need to provide for. So sort of this is somewhat of a compromise number in that it's replacing half of that inventory of the equipment needs, but still leaving some that are not being replaced. So it would catch us up to some degree, but it doesn't give them everything that they were looking for. So, and again, there's no magic to that number, but it does address, would help us catch up somewhat to that improve upon the useful life that has been extended on some of those, or overextended on some of the existing vehicles that were at the department. In the next category, I'll move down, corrections and other public safety. Obviously, from the very beginning, we've talked about the City Justice Center and the improvements that it needs. Overall, it was about just under a $20 million project, of which we provided $7 million last fiscal year. And then we needed to provide another $12.5 million to cover the rest of those projects that are currently ongoing. This would, as a top priority, fund those items. It's split between the half-cent surplus and or the half surplus for the capital fund, as well as some ARPA funds, 4.75 in each and 7.75 from the surplus. That's how you'd get to the 12.5. There's no particular rhyme or reason for the particular source of funding there, but what it says is that once we allocated half the surplus for all the matching funds, anything left was available for projects, and that happened to be the biggest one there. And then the other item under other public safety would be the PSAP. In this scenario anyway, would provide $3.2 million towards completing the design of this facility. $1 million of that would be in the Devo fund, which is public safety infrastructure, specifically by ordinance. That was not budgeted in the fiscal 22 budget, but remains available. And the other proposed would be $2.2 million from ARPA. I don't know, Rich, did you want to say anything about the PSAP and what that would provide for you?
So I think the one thing that we just need to keep in mind with the PSAP is that this 3.2 million would be for us to get the design restarted. The design was placed on hold in May of 2020. We have a consultant on board who started this. I think we all look every day and we read articles about issues with 911 and different things going on. This is a consolidated answering point for fire, police, EMS, citizen service in an EOC, Emergency Operations Center. And, the fact here is, there's going to always be some questions about what we're doing as we're going through this design. We can certainly answer those in a standalone facility to accommodate, those emergency services. And the other thing is that this facility would be designed up to all the standards for, tornado and all the issues with that a emergency operations center and 911 facility in today's world would be built to, but it would also be built that it could be easily expandable if in the future, by any stretch of the imagination, we needed to add on to it. So we would build it to be easily expandable.
How long do you think it would take for this design phase to be completed, Rich?
Well, actually, I would tell you this, that the design documents, the construction bids right now, if we started rolling on this thing, we could be finished in about the first quarter of 23. It's a relatively, technical design and project. So there's a lot of work that has to go into this. If we started immediately, we could possibly have design ready to go to construction for bidding fourth quarter of 24.
Rich, I have a question.
Yes.
We have delayed this project. How long have we delayed it now? For about a year or year and a half?
2020 going on a year, right? 2 years.
So have we been assessed any penalties or delayed charges with the architecture design company?
We will. And that's a great point, LaTanya. The original contract was about 2.445 million. And we have not negotiated with them yet to see what the restart would be, what additional costs would be. We anticipate an escalation, and that's why we have a $3.2 million cost in this number.
Can we get that number confirmed so that we can know exactly where we're going?
So we can, but we would have to go through a negotiation with them. It would take a substantial amount of time. What I would prefer we do is, I'm relatively sure that this will cover it. I think we're pretty close, actually, through our preliminary negotiations with them. But if it's north of their number, by any stretch of the imagination, Capital Committee could easily reprogram whatever's remaining into something else.
Thanks. So then if we start, just say if we were to start, if the capital committee approved the funding, we were able to start or restart the design, construction could begin in sometime in 2023. We would have a completion date of what, 2024, 25?
Well, third quarter 25, assuming we restart the design the first quarter of 22. So we're coming up on that pretty quickly.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, in the other municipal buildings and equipment category, that includes buildings such as City Hall and the city courts and civil courts and such. There are a couple items here that would be funded through the court system. It's funny, I don't know, Rich, whether you got a call or not, but about an hour before this morning's meeting, I got a call from the courts that said they had a water leak over the weekend and now they've got some damage in some of the courtrooms. So it's one of those things, again, as I always mention, every time when we talk about capital, you'd like to do some new things, but then something comes up and say, hey, look, you just had this, something blew up over the weekend and we've got repairs we have to make. So it's that kind of thing that comes up. And if we don't address it in the capital budget, we're going to have to address in the operating budget, and that's something the courts can do. So it's something that we're going to have to buck up and actually look at the system.
Oh, I'd just like to make a comment on that. So if you see at the bottom of G, there's an item called miscellaneous repairs. What that is exactly what Paul is talking to. A transformer explodes, a water pipe breaks, an HVAC piece of equipment goes down. This is something that, because where we are in these maintenance cycles, they're beyond their useful life. Many of these systems that we talk about can break, at any point in time. And so we are charged then to fix them. And what this does is it gives a little bit of latitude instead of just simply calling out projects for things like a water main break or a electrical service failure, in order to keep services and operations in our facilities daily. So that's why that one says miscellaneous, because these things happen every day of every week of every year.
And if you recall, well, we did have $500,000 this year in this year's budget, capital budget for miscellaneous repairs. And I think you've gone through about 90% of it through the first quarter, last time I checked.
Right. I'm actually spent out as of today, and we are in October, and I've got to get through the rest of the year.
Elsewhere in this category, the medical examiner one, it was a smaller item, but it was important. The asbestos abatement was also ranked pretty high on the CAC list as well, $75,000. And then the plumbing upgrades for juvenile court. Again, that doesn't address everything on that list, obviously. Two of the big items we can talk about a little bit further down, with the fire alarm systems, both City Hall and the courts aren't accommodated in this list, even though they're important. Although it's just that there's such a big ticket item, we'd have to discuss that a little bit more, I believe. In the final category was city vehicles. Looking at the CAC priorities, obviously the ones related to service vehicles, refuse, streets, forestry, and parks were ranked the highest. So what this number is, this is primarily those four categories. It's not everything that was on Chris's list that was critical. So Chris, I don't know if this ends up being the dollar amount, you might have to do a little juggling there, moving some things up. The refuse trucks line, that's simply the $1.1 million that, and LaTanya, we talked a little bit about this prior when we were asking. Every year we do a combination of cash purchase and lease purchase as part of our vehicle replacement for refuse. it's on a cycle, and we're using those refuse fee as part of the operating budget. But since this year that lease would have been only about $1 million, it's such a small amount, it's not efficient to go out on its own. So the idea was that we'd be purchasing outright through this process. And so having listed all those categories of potential projects for each of those categories, again, you can see the totals. I was trying to meet your guidance, Nancy, in terms of the 50 million for ARPA, and then you can see the other sources also being allocated. So that would be the full allocation of 68,750 based on those sources that you see on the list. However, it doesn't have a lot of other items that, and Tom, Shepard, I know you had asked about other items on that would be funded or could be funded that wouldn't be potentially accommodated, or maybe we do want to accommodate somehow. And I've listed some there, particularly arterial streets, which was a $14 million item. I've got I found the list of details for various of those arterials, and I pulled out Grand and Kings Highway as an example. That would be 6.4 million if you wanted to do the whole thing. Grand in particular would be a little over about 3.5, and I can share that with you if you need it. Now, Rich, you talked a little bit about the pool renovations and the boiler replacements. That's $10 million of that list is not in there, in there, but you talked about how you could prioritize those and reallocate those costs. And then the two big items about fire alarm systems, both the civil courts and Carnahan Court, which is 4.3, and then City Hall with 1.7. That's $6 million by itself. That also hasn't been accommodated in this list. And then the telecom system that we just heard about, that's $4.9 million. And I don't know if that could be phased or not, or what we want to do there. And then of course, any other items that you all as committee members and the principals that you represent would like to see in this list. So that's, I'll just open that up for discussion, just so your impact. I will share one more item, and that's this is the detail on the arterial street. We do have that. I could share that. This was something that streets had. So for instance, I was thinking, and again, it's that trying to balance the structural needs of the facilities that sometimes no one sees with something that people could appreciate because they see. And I was thinking, well, heck, even if we could just throw Grand Avenue, just sort of from stem to stern in there, that would be, of course, that would be $3.1 million on to what we'd have available, or within that limit of what we have available. So these are just decisions that we as a committee would have to recommend at some point. So I just wanted to bring that one up. So I'll open it up just to you all as committee members. Obviously, we're not making decisions today, but I just wanted to present a scenario that we can at least form as a source of discussion and concerns or anything else that you'd like to talk about. And I'll just open that up.
So Paul, I have one question on the ARPA funding of $50 million. Is that the maximum amount allowed or remaining?
No, if you remember from our discussion last week, and I don't know if do I have that available. Let's see. Let me see if I can pull that up. If you look at what we had discussed last week, talking about here's ARPA, the award was 498, we received 249. In the budget, we had 17.3 for revenue replacement, and then we had a net 122.9 million allocated in Board Bill 2, and you can see where that came about. That includes takes out the rental assistance program and the vetoed amounts. And so that leaves you with 108.8. So that's technically what we have available. Now, I know, Nancy, you had mentioned other ARPA items that you'd like to be able to address with these funds. I figured at some point there was going to be a discussion on how to allocate the 33, but you had mentioned the 50. And so I was thinking if you take the 33, you'd have 75, but you were saying that there were other items that you'd like to address with ARPA funds. So I just went with that 50 number, but again, that's however we want to approach it. Technically, you got the 108 number, but as I understand, there's going to be other discussions with other ARPA funds. So I'll leave that open to, again, ENA members, or you as members of the Capital Committee representing ENA members and the Board of Aldermen to discuss what level of funding we'd like to have.
And Paul, so these amounts, this all fits into the ARPA, the Treasury guidelines, though.
Yeah,
Correct.
what this is focusing on is the revenue replacement, of the bucket of those ARPA funds. So as we talked about how much money we lost so far, calculated through the last fiscal year, well, actually the last calendar year, it was about $150 million. And so the use of those funds is pretty broad. Although there are some restrictions. You can't use it for debt service. You can't use it for pensions. You can't use it for rainy day reserves, things like that. But it can be used for services, including capital improvements and infrastructure repairs and such like that. And so, yeah, that's what this is. This was be using.
So that amount, so the amount that we lost, the revenue replacement, you said was over 180 million?
50.
No, what we lost, our revenue loss amount for the city, period, our calculation, wasn't it 180 million?
Well, here's how it, let me see if I've got that. Got that ready. It was actually about 158. What it was, what the guidance under ARPA is there's a specific formula you use in order to calculate what the loss is. So it may not be necessarily what we look at it from a fiscal year, but they look at it, there are going to be 4 measurements and it'll be over the next 4 calendar years. So the first measurement was as of the end of 2020. So as of December 31st, 2020, what was your loss? So what that required was a calculation of revenues for FY20, which ended June 30th, forwarded to December 31st. Let me see if I've got this. I would bring it up screen if I've got it. I do have an illustration of this, so let me share this. If this is on screen. Okay, so here would be just an illustration. So you got 4 measurement points, each at the end of starting in 2020, 21, 22, and 23, what the loss would be. So you had a fiscal year end, actually that was fiscal 19 revenues. But and what you're allowed to do, and what this blue line represents, is what they do is they say whatever the revenue was as of the end of calendar 20, we provide an escalation. This is the feds providing an escalation of 4.1%. So it's pretty generous. It's a 4.1% growth rate. So going for the next 4 years. And your first calculation at the end of 20, this was done and it basically showed that there was a drop of revenues from fiscal 19 to fiscal 20. If you incorporate that 4.1% growth rate, it was close to it was over $157 million. All right. And this includes, and again, the calculation was generous. It includes all governmental funds, excluding grants, and excluding utilities. So it does include such as the parking enterprise fund and airport, even though airport is being replenished with other funds, that's also
Right.
included in the calculation. Water division is not, it's a utility. So that calculation tells you what the loss was. Now there will be 3 more. And so I would expect that this gap is going to start shrinking over the next several years as revenues recover. But the first calculation was showing something in excess of $150 million loss. And so that's
okay. So the capital committee would be recommending using these funds because they fall under the lost revenue figure. They're within that amount, that 157 point whatever million we have it at right now. That's correct. That's what we would be doing by
right. Basically
recommending the spending. So, and
Yeah.
I guess I'm asking that because, and you're presenting that to us because from your understanding, with the lost revenue recognition, it can be broadly spent, and there's just a few categories that, or there's a few things you can't do with that money. That's fund the pensions, pay down debt, or just slap it into a reserve fund.
Right, and infrastructure is one of those things actually specifically mentioned as a potential use of those funds as well.
Right. But then they give like clear, since it's such a broad use, I guess it was easier for them to say, okay, this is what you can't use it for.
Right.
And when they list the things that you can't use it for. So I'm just pointing that out that if we're as a committee, which has many appointees of the mayor's office on it, that and this all is going to have to happen through a board bill. Last time, the last board bill that got passed that appropriated funds from this ARPA money, a lot of that money got vetoed because it said it didn't fit into all of these other categories that are allowed, but it wasn't allowed to be spent under the lost revenue recognition category, which, as you know, we're saying as a committee, money can be broadly spent that way because we're sending this over as our recommendation. I just want to point that out. I don't know if we're going to run into that same roadblock again where the lost revenue recognition category of spending is not recognized, or if there was something else going on with that previous money for North St. Louis that got vetoed by the mayor. I just want to point that out. I mean, it's kind of, glaring to me that we're going to send this over from this committee saying, oh, we can spend this in the lost revenue recognition because it's so broad. But we had other money directly for North St. Louis that passed the Board of Aldermen 27-1 that got vetoed because it was said it didn't fit the guidelines. So I just want to point that out. And I like that to be in the minutes, my statement to that effect.
Okay. Yeah, Tom, I can only speak to the guidelines that I've seen, and that actually specifically mentions capital infrastructure as one of the potential uses of those revenue replacement funds.
So,
Yeah, no, I understand.
Paul, could I respond to? a couple things?
Sure.
First is that the mayor only has one appointee on this board, and that would be me. Rich Bradley, Justin Jackson are on the board under the makeup of, I think it's the charter as to how that's written, Paul, and they were not appointed.
The capital
The ordinance, they were not appointed by the mayor. So I'm the mayor's only appointee on this committee. And mostly I'm here because a lot of the things that we are trying to figure out how to fund come under the director of operations. So I should kind of know what we're trying to do with monies that might end up in some of the departments that I help run. Secondly, I think the difference between the veto of the other money and the capital improvements we're talking about now are that what we're talking about sending over to the E&A committee are more specific to exactly how the money is going to be spent, not just that it's a blanket, this much money will be spent for economic development in a particular area. I think that's where, and the lawyers could look at this again, but that's where we got bogged down with what you could and couldn't do. In the list that Paul and Rich have forwarded, and some of us have had some input in from being on these meetings, and we're not making a final decision today, but that list came from, it has specifics as to exactly how the money is going to be spent on capital improvements and some infrastructure, and that's the difference between the two, in that it's more of a, and I'm using my hands, which nobody can see, but it's more of a set statement as to how that's going to be spent, not just this is what money we're going to spend in this way. I think that's where the Treasury Department got a little bit funky with us as to how we were going to spend development money when we couldn't really define what that was going to look like. But enough lawyers have weighed in on it, and I'm sure you have opinions from the city council and the president of the board's council to address that issue. But I just wanted to make it clear, since there are public people watching this, that there were, to my understanding, there's a differentiation between how we're looking at this versus how we look at the blanket amounts. So, and we'll probably agree to disagree on that matter, but the goal is to move forward. Secondly, I wanted to say, this is just part of when we talked about this before. There's a lot of other infrastructure needs that are coming, and we're hoping that the reconciliation and infrastructure bill gets passed, and that more of what people presented to us will be able to be looked at and funded to make infrastructure changes to the city as we go forward. And I think we're really just waiting for that amount of money to be finalized and then come to the city. But in looking at this is the first tranche of money that we've gotten. So we wanted to do some infrastructure improvements, as well as a lot of improvements around equity and social justice issues. The next tranche of money comes in the spring, but hopefully in December. I might be too early, but the infrastructure and reconciliation money comes, and we can have some very spirited meetings about how we should be figuring out what we spend the infrastructure and money on once they tell us how much the city is going to get. So that's my thinking on some of the going further down the road, what else we'll be able to spend money on to help make the city better.
So Paul, in addition to what Nancy just said.
Yeah, just to clarify, I was saying about the appointments first, so that, you know, people are on the board.
Hold on.
Well,
Yeah, hold on. Yeah, hold on, Tom.
Clarify
Hold
what
on.
I said about
Hey.
the appointments. People
Tom.
are on the board.
Hey, Tom. Okay.
Okay.
Could you hold that thought? Just hold on to that thought real quick. And I just want to, Latanya wanted to say something, but go ahead. Okay, thanks.
Okay, in addition to what Nancy was saying, so if we get the infrastructure bill or the monies in, just say December, January, if we look at our other priority items that are not funded and look at the critical need or the short-term need, or when this type of work would be needed for the city resources, are we looking at these as critical short-term? And I'm looking only at these other priority items not funded. So are they critical? Are they more of a short-term nature that would need to be funded before this other money came in or this other tranche came in?
Latanya, I would say they're all critical because they're all from the critical list. In terms of a timetable, Rich, I defer to you in terms of which ones are more time sensitive than others, if that makes sense.
And the reason why I ask, because the first one I look at is the fire alarm systems. Is that more of a critical, more urgent need than others?
Right.
That we couldn't wait until the other tranche comes? And if we needed an additional 6 million, or a telecom system, we needed another 5 million. Is there, if we had to make a decision, could we just take another 10 million until we got to that next tranche? I'm just looking at the critical need, because when I see fire alarm system, I'm thinking critical. So I'm just looking at.
Just a couple comments on that. When we prioritize the list, you're 100% right, Latanya. These are the critical needs that are there. And they were in the neighborhood of 170 million, whatever the case was. But I think when you get down to this, just like we've always done on this committee, you know that there is a certain amount of money that we're going to get to spend. And what we try to do is extract those items that we think are going to touch the most critical needs across the city that are going to affect, safety, operations, and all the things that we need day to day. Yes, the fire alarm system in City Hall is a critical need. Some of the panels are not operating. Some of the panels work, some don't operate. But in the same token, when we start talking about that, I have to say that we have critical bridge needs out there where we know that we've had fatality accidents and we have to address those. So it gets really cumbersome in a job like mine where you're trying to weigh one critical against another because on one day, one may be more critical than another. And unfortunately, I have to try to work with you all to fund as many of those as we possibly can. I mean, in a perfect world, yes, we would be able to do something out of all the critical needs category, a portion of every project there. Whether that funding is there or not is not up to me to determine, but yes, they're critical for all the things you said, but I think we have a solid baseline to start with. As Nancy talked about, there's an infrastructure package that's coming. We don't know what the details on that are exactly yet, but we know it'll be for infrastructure rather than some other things that ARPA funding may be able to be used for at this point in time. So it's a very delicate balance to keep things going. I will tell you from my perspective, I'm happy to get anything fixed, because at the end of the day, there have been many years that we've went with, nickels, dimes, and quarters, and we haven't been there. So I'm grateful for anything that this committee approves, and we will make the best of it until the next allotment comes.
Can the pool renovations, are those indoor pools or outdoor pools?
Indoor.
Those are indoor.
Total was for indoor and outdoor, but what we're going to highlight here and this list is indoor.
Okay.
Just so my recollection, there's 4 indoor and 3 outdoor. Is that right?
Yeah, 7 total, 3 outdoor, 4 indoor.
Okay, so okay, great.
Thank you.
And Paul, I just want to say too, as we think about that telecom system, that was including the system and everything, but right now the critical part is that infrastructure. So that part of it, when we talk about phases and stuff, it will be done, but the infrastructure needs to be done first before we talk about a new system. And that total did include both. But the infrastructure is the part that we would have to move on first.
So Judy, how much is the infrastructure?
That's what I was going to ask.
Yeah, I'll break that out because the totals I sent you, I put it all together, but I'm going to break out the infrastructure and send you what that is.
Okay, if we could get that, that'd be helpful.
Okay, I'll get that to you.
Hey, Paul.
Yes.
I just want to make sure I'm seeking clarification here. I think and maybe it's just the way I was following the conversation. I want to make sure we're not conflating a second tranche of ARPA money with a not passed reconciliation package yet, right? So I feel like we feel more funds are coming through a reconciliation package, but those votes aren't cast. That's not finalized by any stretch of the imagination. And in fact, I think just over the weekend, Speaker Pelosi's office was negotiating that number down. So I think it is prudent until we really have cash in hand that we try to plan for the most critical items around infrastructure and not say, well, we know infrastructure dollars are coming. We don't know what it looks like. But it's going to come out of Washington, D.C. I think that would be not very sound logic moving forward, or for budget planning purposes. not the best. Now, will it come? And if it comes, great. I think cash is fungible. We might have some time to swap some things in and out. But I think it's probably prudent to know we are getting a second tranche of another 248 million from ARPA. And that is when?
That should be next spring. I think we got ours, in May this year, so it'd probably be the same. I think it's the same timetable next year.
Great. Okay. So I just caution this committee in terms of planning purposes. Let's see, exactly what happens with reconciliation packages. I think a lot of that's going to be around climate control expenses, climate crisis, what they're calling, the back to work and family and workplace type expenses. So I do want to move forward, quite frankly, with this committee's recommendations when we get there around sort of those critical infrastructure that Rich and his team have highlighted, at least personally speaking.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's a good point. I never count my eggs before they're hatched either. So yeah, let's keep that in mind as well. Tom Shepard, were you still there? Did you want to? You still have a thought you wanted to share?
Yeah, no, we can move
Okay.
forward. I did have one question just about the list, Rich, for the bridges. I think it was a 2.8 million. I'm driving now. I think it was a $2.8 million amount that was just, I guess, going to be for other bridges.
Yes, those are, and I actually have a breakdown of those. They were given in the presentation, the critical bridge needs that we know today. And there's a list of them. It's about 8 to 10 bridges for repairs.
Okay,
Yeah, Tom,
so the ones that are up there in red on the map, all of those are getting
They're under
those
bridge
are part
repair.
of that.
Yes, right down
Okay.
there.
Yeah, and just so you know, yeah, those were the items. Those are the bridges that were identified in the original inventory. There was not a particular match for those, but they are repair projects listed as critical.
Okay, so everything that was in red on the map that you shared, all of that's getting taken care of, or would get taken care of through these recommendations.
Yes.
Yes.
Under bridges. Yeah, it was a $10.4 million total under bridges that was listed as critical, and all of that would be on this list.
Okay. That's it.
And I think you mentioned the map. Yeah, and I did share that. Let's see. Strat. And again, this is a map that had been shared earlier, I think in an earlier meeting we had, and definitely with the Citizens Advisory Committee as well. Just a map of where these projects were located in across the city for the capital improvement needs. Both the arterials, the bridge repairs, and all. I know this is tiny, but you can see where all the rec centers are and all of that too. So I would expect this to be updated as we sort of narrow this down and our funding level down, so we can actually hopefully put one together that reflects those actual projects that are funded. Okay. Any other questions on any of what we've discussed today, or the lists, or any of that? All right. So what I'd like to do is follow up. I know, Rich, you said you'll have some information for us on the rec centers and how you'd like to see that broken up. It's a little differently than what we've got, so get some more detail on that. And I know, Judy, you just mentioned breaking up the telecom system for the infrastructure piece, so we could get that. So I guess I just wanted to leave all of this with you all, just to go over and just get back with your principals and discuss things and see where we are in terms of coming up with some recommendations. If that's okay, is there anything else that I'm missing or anyone else would like to explore in terms of potential recommendations? Okay, so we've got a tentatively scheduled meeting for Thursday. I believe that one is at 1 p.m. Does that still work for everyone? Is that still good?
Unfortunately, it does not work for me, Paul, and I was hoping to kind of bring some potential new uses to the committee, and I was just wondering if anyone could be flexible on that day or time.
Okay. How about, well, I tell you what, let's, yeah, we could try, is Thursday not good at all? The rest of later Thursday, not good?
Later in the afternoon could work for me.
Well, yeah, let's see if we can, yeah, I'll have to have Michelle do that, to reach out to you, because I'd like to continue this series of meetings, because the idea, get something done, have another one this week. So I tell you what, we'll reach out to everyone and try to get another meeting scheduled this week. If not Thursday, perhaps Friday. I know you got a board meeting on Friday, but
It's okay. Friday, I can make Friday work. I'm wide open Friday.
And then obviously I did promise Alderwoman Davis would give her an update on this meeting as well, make sure she's available as well, so that we can, I want everyone to be available for these meetings so that we can get some consensus on where we're going in terms of recommendations. So we'll do that. Oh, okay. Michelle just sent a text saying pre-NA is Thursday. So yeah, we'll work with schedules to make sure that we can get everyone available. Okay. In the meantime, take this information home with you, and give it a lot of thought. And we'll be talking some more. And if there's anything else that I've missed in the meantime, please let me know, and we'll dig that up. But that's all I had today. Is there anything else that we need to discuss?
Well, at the next meeting, can you do a timeline of when the board bill is introduced? Like a timeline of when, like the process, if that's possible?
Yeah, I'll have to, obviously it's all contingent upon when we can get some recommendation coming from this committee, but I wouldn't think it would take that much longer. I mean, if we can get something, next week sometime, it wouldn't take much longer to draft a board bill. I don't talk with Nancy as well as Tom and see what the prerogatives are in terms of when we want to actually get the bill introduced. But yeah, we can do that.
Okay, thanks.
All right. All right. If there is nothing further, I guess we will stand adjourned. Thank you all.